Hello class, welcome to my exhibit. I am known as Mr. Cook or Angel Cook, and today I'll be showing you one of the most beautiful, significant, and remarkable paintings of the American Revolutionary War. Now, this painting is known as the Battle of Concord and Lexington, also known as the shot heard around the world. Now, this painting took place April 19th, 1775 in Lexington and Concord. Now, this painting is significant because it's also known as the first battle of the American Revolutionary War between the American colonists and the world power known as British. Now, to this day, it's still unknown who took the first shot that started the Revolutionary War. Now, many people will be asked, who did take the first shot? Personally, I believe that the Americans took the first shot because they might have been intimidated or scared by the powerful, organized British army that looked ahead of them and maybe felt impulsive and took the first shot. Now, others may ask, who painted this wonderful painting? And that is a great question because the person who painted this was William Barnes Wallen, who's an amazing artist in painting this remarkable painting. Now, William used a Renaissance style to maybe show a little bit dramatic, but show how bloody and how remarkable this battle was between the colonists and the British. Now, a couple things that I personally found interesting about this photo is the difference between each side of the war. Now, on the right side, on the far right side over there, you can see that the British are well organized and led by strong leaders, and were taking out the colonists one by one. And over on this side, you have the American colonists who you cannot really see an appointed leader, and they're just all very chaotic, but still trying to fight for their lives. And also, another thing I found about this painting that was significant was how it shows how tragic this battle was, maybe for the colonists and the militia, and how many lives they lost. Because you can see in this photo, you can see like 3 to 5 dead men just laying on the ground while the colonists are just going to keep fighting for independence. And those are things I found very interesting about this painting. Now I will be discussing the events that led up to the first Battle of the American Revolutionary War, Battle of Concord and Lexington. Now, the British Parliament passed many laws and acts that really create tension among the colonies and the British. Now, this would lead up to the battle. But first, let's talk about these laws and acts. Now, the laws and acts that stood out to me most was the Stamped Act of 1765, which made the colonists very unhappy. Now, the Stamped Act taxed the colonists on all imported goods like paper, newspaper, documents, and you name it, all stuff they use in their daily lives. Now, also taxed on playing cards and dice. Now, the colonists were very unhappy about this, so this created very unity in the colonists against the British Parliament and the British. Now, so they protested this, and it got repealed by the British Parliament, which was a good thing for the colonists. But the Parliament passed the Townshend Act, which made the colonists very unhappy, like the Stamp Act. The Townshend Act taxed on ink, glass, paper, you name it, stuff they used in their daily lives. Now, the colonists were not happy about this, so they protested no taxation without representation, which you may ask, what is no taxation without representation? Now, the colonists were demanding that if you were going to tax us, that we would have to be represented in the passing of laws and acts that would be impacted on us. Now, that never happened, which created very mass tension and order that started to lead to the battle. Now, we're going to talk about one event known as the Boston Massacre, which really rose the tension up. Now, the Boston Massacre started on a snowy evening in Boston, March 5th, 1770, where colonists were laying dead on the street. Now, you may ask, how did this happen? Now, it started with a mass protest stating no taxation without representation. The British soldiers in front of the customs house. Now, protesting slowly grew to mob violence and taunting of the British soldiers by throwing snowballs, bricks, stones, whatever they can find with force at the British soldiers. Now, as the colonist mob grew, tension grew with it, which led to the first shot, followed by other British soldiers' first shot, and eventually led to 5 colonists and 3 injured just laying on the streets of a snowy night of Boston. Now, that after the Boston Massacre, the colonists decided to take actions into their own hands. Now, this event would lead to the next event known as the Boston Tea Party. Now, a group of colonists decided to retaliate and dump the British tea out and against the Tea Act, which was outrageously taxing the colonists for tea, which eventually led to the colonists' actions. Now I'm going to talk. The American colonists start to form a rebellion, gathering weapons, supplies, preparing for a future battle. Now the British heard and found out about this and had their orders for their army to go march down there and seize and burn their supplies and cancel any rebellion that could go against them. Now the British were marching to Concord and unexpectedly met by the militia Minutemen, warned by Paul Revere. They gave him a little bit of advantage against the British. Now, the British fought in a short skirmish against these poorly trained farmers, blacksmiths, and townsmen fighting for independence. Now, the British quickly took out most of the militiamen in a short skirmish, and the British started to march to Concord and trying to get their weapons and supplies. Now, the British continued to march on. Most of the supplies were hidden and destroyed before the British even got to Concord. Now, the British party was engaged by 400 patriots on the hillside of Concord's North Bridge. Now, the British party was forced to withdraw and retreat back to Boston. And instead of just retreating back with all of their men, the British encountered every type of guerrilla warfare enforced by the American patriots. Now, the American patriots would hide behind buildings, trees, logs, rocks, and had the advantage and took out the British as they retreated into Boston. And the British really suffered massive casualties from this battle. The British ended up losing about 3 times the casualties as the American colonists in the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which is a very surprising stat, considering the fact that the British have been on the most campaigns and the most powerful army known on Earth at that time, which is crazy that they ended up losing 3 times casualties as the militia Minutemen. Now, nextly, I'll be talking about the effects of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Now, after the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the Revolutionary War would go ups and downs for both sides, and it ended up going in the favor of the American colonists. The American colonists ended up winning the Revolutionary War and declaring independence in 1776, and officially recognizing the United States in 1783 through the Treaty of Paris. Now, lastly, I'd like to talk about how you can analyze a primary source like a historian. Now, first, you want to pick your source and annotate the whole source. Next, you would maybe like to write down on a piece of paper, summarize what source that you've been through. Now, thirdly, you want to create questions to ask yourself for reflection and ask others and maybe get information from both sides. Now, next you want to make connections with other sources to provide more information for your source. And then lastly, I would provide some background information to help strengthen your historical context and ideas and all of that. Now, thank you, class, for listening to my exhibit posts. Thank you.